Hello and welcome to this week's edition of Victor Alonge on Real Estate. My name is Victor Alonge, your anchor. You're welcome to this edition. As we said last week, we will be continuing from where we stopped, especially on the issue of building collapse. And last week we did talk about the unfortunate incident that happened last year, November, and what it actually implied, for confidence in the industry. This week we'll be talking more about not building under construction, but existing high-rise buildings where people are already living. And we refer to some cases in the US, the Miami building collapse. We also mentioned the one that happened in 2018 in Brazil and in Tehran in 2017. All, building that were sort of old, about some 40 years, some even more, that came down. And we did say that we don't really have incidences of that in this country yet, but we just need to make sure that we forestall it. And this week we'll be focusing more on how to prevent building collapse in the already existing high-rise buildings in this country. I want to actually say that from experiences abroad, and especially from the reports of those collapsed buildings, I think the major problems that actually triggered the unfortunate incident was the carbonation, of the concrete component of the building. Carbonation actually increases acidity, and acidity leads to corrosion, of especially the reinforcement component. And when the reinforcement component is corroded, we know that leads to what we call structural failure. Structural failure means the building is no longer, strong enough to carry the load it's supposed to carry. And when the load comes on it, it's actually caving. So that is one of the reasons. And, the other one is actually most of the building components. Building is actually made up of different components, and those different components are manufactured separately and they have different useful lives. And most of those components, if they are not properly maintained, they go out of their useful lives, and when they are still retained, when they have expired, they can actually cause problem for the entire building, because when part of the building is actually weak, it affects the entire building. And again, the other thing is the poor health and safety practices of occupants. So these are things that we need to actually be aware of that can cause existing buildings to actually collapse. And in actually mitigating the likely effect of these practices, we need to understand that the management of those buildings have to be top-notch. And that is what we'll be looking at after this short break. Please don't go away. Welcome back. It's still Victor Alonge on Real Estate, and I remain your anchor, Victor Alonge. I said, before we went on break, that I identified some of the reasons why existing building structures can collapse. So what can we do now to actually ensure, that we don't experience, because they are preventable. And I think the first thing we need to do is to ensure that there is greater transparency in the maintenance history of the buildings. It is important that every high-rise building where human beings live, the maintenance is not taken for granted. And it's not just that you assume that things have been done. They have to be documented that they have been done. And documentation means that as we progress, bankers, insurance companies will now have to make it a condition for, insuring the buildings, and also even for granting loan facilities for those who have apartments there, who want to mortgage it and so on. This transparent maintenance history must actually be a condition now. The other one is to ensure that our regulations are tighter, and we have more enforcement of our building codes. So when the buildings are being built before they become occupied, we ensure that we actually have proper implementation, by ensuring that we have frequent inspections. And those who are already occupied, we also ensure that we have regular, periodic inspection so that we can identify, systemic failures before they actually occur. And the other point we need to also look at is our curriculum, because this is actually a dynamic process. They need to be brought back to the learning process. So we need to see more of building failure and pathology being weaved into our undergraduate curriculum, in environmental design and management, in terms of building technology courses, estate management courses, architecture, quantity surveying, and so on. And the other thing is that, which is actually key, is to ensure that we have an effective recertification requirement. I mean, in the US, they have it. Every 40 years, condominium must be recertified. And they're actually looking at bringing it back now to less than 40 years. This is to ensure that, we do it for our bridges. Sometime last year or thereabout, the Third Mainland Bridge was closed for maintenance purposes. Our high-rise buildings, even though they are not owned by government, should also be subjected to periodic certification so that we all have this understanding that the integrity of the building we live in is not in doubt and that there is adequate regulation to take care of it, because human beings' life matters. That's all we have for you this week. We hope you've had a great time, being part of this program. Please don't forget to visit us and check out our social media platform for previous editions of Victor Alonge on Real Estate. Until I come your way next week, please continue to keep safe. Goodbye.